Hello and welcome back to another daily cribbage. Opponent hits us with the good luck and we return in kind. We're looking at 5-5 queen, but we've got a 7-8 as well, so we should take care of that. And we can take care of that with the 2, so we can discard. So we could either discard 2-8 or 7 queen, and 7 queen is significantly safer, so let's do it like that. We also get to fake the flush in some way. We've got lots of hearts in hand. So we'll come up to 17. I think this is a good chance to offload one of our 5s. And hopefully we can get rid of the other one. Opponent probably has an ace left. There we go. So that they have the 8-point hand and we have a 10-point hand with our 2 5s. Nice. So our opponent cashing in lots of points there, getting up to 18. But we're not doing too bad ourselves with 11. Got a nice double run with the 2 aces, so we can throw away the 4-7, which often doesn't do too badly in the crib. There's a lot of ways for it to improve. Let's just pair these 3s. Expect this goes badly a lot of the time. And if our opponent has some 2s or 5s, it's always going to be a little bit tricky. So what are we facing here? Double 3, 6, 9. Okay. So the reason I didn't start off with an ace, say, is because I was worried about our opponent's 2s, but maybe it's okay in that particular case. I also had hopes that we'd be able to get lots of points later on from our pair of aces, but I guess that never really materialized. 3-10 is a fairly safe discard. We don't want to throw away the 5. And let's see if our opponent has anything for this. They've got a 2. They have another 2. No, 2 ace. 2 ace ace. Getting points out of their pair of aces there. Very nice. I noticed a strange blue bar appear across the bottom of my screen. I don't know if you can see that as well, but I haven't seen that one before. Only a few points for our opponent here and there in their hand in the crib. So quite lucky for us. 39, 38. We've got lots of flushes in hand. I guess I'll keep the pair of 10s together in the crib. Another 10. Very nice. And I guess I'll just play up with the king. If our opponent has an ace, then get some value out of it. Okay, well, I'm playing my ace here. I expect my opponent has more 2s than anything else. But they've shown us, what did they show us? 4, 6, 9, 8. Does give them 5 points because the 10 makes a run of 5, and we get 6 points in our crib. Opponent does make it to the 44 milestone just about, so we're hoping that the medians kick in, the positive skew kicks in, and we start to gain some ground. Okay, so 3 on top doesn't do much for our hand. We do get trips for 6 points there. We do expect an ace here from our opponent. Thankfully it's not trip aces. And no jack in our opponent's hand. Our opponent does have a few jacks there, so we're a little bit worried. 2 points there from the 2-3 king. And opponent is not looking like they'll be on track for their next milestone. Got 3, 4, 5, 7 I think I want to keep together. Or 3, but ace king is probably too bad to throw away, so I'll throw away the 7 instead. And we are cutting amazingly. Get a huge hand. Oh, and I'll take that 31, thank you very much. And see what they've got now left. 7 and a 6. Okay. 4 points there. It was possible, if we knew what our opponent's hand was, we could have extracted some extra value out of it. So our opponent does well to sort of get away with only losing a few points there. 2 double 3, I'd love to keep that together. Throw away 6 queen. Seems pretty good actually. I'm going to do that. It's Doesn't look like I'm keeping many immediate points, but actually it improves a lot of the time. It plays just fine, and I also discard something that's fairly safe in the crib. In this case, opponent cut to 9, which does give them at least 2 points there, but it's only 2 points, and the computer seems to like it as well. There are some other options. We could have thrown away 3-9, but in this case, decided not to. I'm going to go 3 king here. We don't need to keep the king, king, jack together, and just take these 6 points, which is actually 12 points, so very nice. We'll come up to 13, and we're faking the flush somewhat. Opponent has 5-9 queen. They have a jack. No, they've got another queen, so the ace cut gives them a couple of points there, but it gives us way more points, much better for us. And let's see if it did anything to our crib. Yeah, it gave us an extra point in the crib, or extra 2 points, which we like. Our position is looking very nice, and we need to decide if we want to play a little bit risky, throw away the maximum for our hand, which would be 7-9 here, play a little bit safer and go 9 queen. I think I'll go a bit safer. I think we have the room to do it. I'll start off with a 2 because we have 2 light cards. I want to get rid of one of them. And now I'll get rid of the second one because the other 2 cards are just a little bit too risky for me to play out. Opponent shows 9 queen, which is a good sign. 5 probably means they've got another 5 left. So 8 points in our opponent's hand. Let's see what they get in the crib. Do they get to 96? Not quite. The 9 queen, not really comboing too much. The computer doesn't like our discard too much because we didn't really keep many points in hand there. Again, we're looking at 3-4-5. We've had a few 3-4-5s today. And this time we'll keep it together with the king, as we did last time, and throw away the ace jack. Okay, so I have no desire to give them triple 4s, so I would just play like this, and if our opponent has a pair of 3s, I will be very sad. I only have 1 3, and I expect our opponent to have a 4 here. No, they don't. They just have a 5. I'm not too unhappy about that because, yeah, if their opponent had 5, another 4, they would get more points out of it, but maybe the 4 was safer just because our opponent has fewer of them. Maybe that's a point to come back to later. 2 king is safe while keeping us 6 points. It's safer than throwing away 2-10. We've got, what is this? We've got lots of points in hand, so I think it is all pretty much over. We'll just play out one of our aces now. And the other ace, I might have some 6s here, yep. And I have some 5s here as well. But that is good game, unless I've miscounted. But no, that is 10 points. Little overview. We got lost out a few points on the play, but we got a lot of points in hand, so everything looks up for us. Let's go back for a moment. This is the position that I really want to analyze today, because I made some mistakes in how I thought about it, and maybe it's kind of instructive. The scores are 107 for us, 91 for our opponent. It is our crib. We have a hand of 3-4-5 king, and our opponent, this is midway through the play after we've cut a 9. Opponent led 4, we played king, opponent's gone 8. We avoided pairing the 4, and that's the first decision we made in this play because we want to avoid getting tripled. There's no need to allow that, and if our opponent did triple us, then we'd be on 109 points. We're not guaranteed to go out, and our opponent, if they had a hand such as 4-4-5-6, what is that? That's 14 points. If they get 6 points on top, they're on 97 plus 16, 113. Okay, well, they're still a ways off from getting out, so maybe that's actually okay for us. So pairing the fours is not too bad. I think overall, though, we are looking at very high percentage to win. And what's our goal here? It's really to try and maximize our chance of winning. If you remember from this hand, we discarded ace jack, so we're not expecting too much from the crib here. Most of our points are coming from our hand, which is worth 5 points. So we're going to be on something like 113, 114 at the end of this round. And so we're going to be looking to get 6 points, 7 or maybe even 8 points next round, which is very doable. But the number of points that we need to get, well, as that goes down, it gets significantly easier for us to win next round. But we also want to avoid our opponent getting too much value out of hands to a point where we have to be very careful about how we play. In this case, after our opponent plays an 8, we're extremely relieved. Opponent doesn't have an extremely powerful hand like 4, 5, double 6, which would be 16 points. And so opponents likely score at the end of this round. If they have a good hand here, maybe double 3, 4, 8, which scores 8 points, it's going to be in the region of around 100 points. And if we give away a couple of points on the play, maybe it'll be like 101, 102 points. And that's really fine. We even have a chance to get some more points after our next hand as the hand after that. We get some. We'll be likely to still be alive then and be able to go out when we're the next dealer if things go extremely poorly for us. And some of our equity in this position comes from those scenarios. So we shouldn't rule that out too much. We do want to minimize our opponent's scoring in this situation. So let's get down to business. What does the 8 mean for us right here? Well, we need to construct our opponent's range. We need to, what does that mean? We need to understand what are all of the cards our opponent can have in their hand, and how often do they have those cards. Which combinations of cards are we particularly worried about, and which ones are we not worried about? Now, the standard way to work this out is to think about all of the hands that are worth the most points. So if we know that our opponent's hand contains a 4 and an 8, then what are the hands that are worth the most points that contain a 4 and an 8? Also, we can do this blindly by not assuming that we know what the cut card is, or we could assume that our opponent needed a particular cut card in order to achieve the best possible hand. So for instance, if our opponent's hand has double 7 in it, so it's 4, double 7, 8, and our opponent needed a cut of a 6 or a 9 in order to get a 12-point hand, then we could say that this is one of the options. So that's probably one of the highest scoring hands our opponent has, but it's not the highest scoring hand that they would have got if they before the cut card. So let's start with those hands. So assume that the cut card doesn't play a role in, or doesn't play much role in the score of our opponent's hands. What are we thinking? Well, with 4 and 8, combos that involve 4 and 8 are usually ones with 3s. 3, 4, 8 adds to 15, so we're thinking about hands like 3, 4, 8, and you can have an extra 3, a 4, a 5, or a 2. All of these are, so what hands are those? 2, 3, 4, 8, 3, 3, 4, 8, 3, 4, 4, 8, 3, 4, 5, 8. Other hands also include things like 4, 4, 7, 8. So that's 6 points as well. And What other things? Well, there's also, I guess, 3, 4, 8, 8. We also get to sort of whittle away some of those hands because our opponent has shown us a preference for the order that they've played out their cards. So for instance, if you have a hand like 2, 3, 4, 8, then maybe you lead the 3 some of the time because you want to be able to make 15 when your opponent plays a 10 on top of it. Whereas if you lead the 4, then you can never make 15 when your opponent plays a 10 there. You had to either have led the 2 or the 3. So it makes it less likely, but not impossible for our opponent to have things like 2, 3, 4, 8. And so with these kinds of hands in mind, okay, and then the other kinds of hands our opponent has are going to be ones that really need a particular cut card. So things like the 4, 7, 7, 8 or 4, 7, 8, 8 that really need the 9. Maybe these are sort of secondary considerations for the kinds of hands that we should be careful of, but they appear with much lower frequency in our opponent's range because there are so many other hands that really needed a particular cut card that didn't get what they wanted. So for instance, if our opponent's hand was something like 2, 2, 4, 8 and they really needed a cut of a 3, maybe this appears in their range just as much as 4, 7, 8, 8. But the problem with these hands is that we have to make sure that they are somewhat compatible with how our opponents played them out. So they'd want to lead a 4 and have an 8 in them as well. That's the main problem with our thinking that our opponent might have something like 4, 7, 7, 8, is that you probably lead the 7 or the 8 there more often than you would lead the 4, which means that it decreases the likelihood that it's in our opponent's hand right now. Okay, so in my head at this point, I think it's quite accurate to have in mind that our opponent has a lot of 3s and some extra 4s here. Of course, the 4s are a little less likely because we have a 4 and we've seen a 4, so there's only 2 4s left in the deck. There are more 3s. And our opponent definitely does have 5s, but that didn't really cross my mind too much. It crossed my mind in the sense that I wasn't particularly happy to play the 4 in this situation. So in this case, I tried to sort of cut my losses a little bit and say, well, I don't want to play out the 4 or 5. If I play the 5 here, then I'm giving a value to my opponent's extra 4s. And maybe this is actually the fine thing to do. I think this is probably what I missed. I was very fixated in the game that my opponent has an extra 4. So I was mostly thinking about playing against the hand 3, 4, 4, 8. And so I didn't double the 4 to begin with, because I didn't want to give the points to hands like 4, 4, 5, 6. But then once we revealed the 8, I sort of kept in my mind still that my opponent probably still has a double 4, but that does go down a little bit here, where my opponent could just have maybe double 3, double 4, just as well. Although if you have double 3, maybe you would lead the 3 more often. Of course, these things are, all probabilistic. They're up to, there's chance that your opponent doesn't do these things because everyone plays a little bit differently. So in this case, I think actually playing the 5 is quite a good option. So what happens when we play the 5? We take the total to 27. Opponent gets a little bit of value out of their 4s that they have here. But if our opponent does play a 4, then we have a really good indication that our opponent is left with a 3. And so we get to lead our 4 the next time and probably pair their 3 afterwards and get some value. And if our opponent has something like a 7, then nothing's going to happen. And if our opponent has 2s or 5s, then we get value, as we would always get value as long as we keep our 3 and 4. So 5 actually is, I think, quite good here. Instead, I just played the 3, which are does definitely just allow our opponent to pair the 3 that we sort of expect our opponent to have. And as I played it, that sort of went through my mind. I thought, well, they're going to take the total to 28, and it's quite bad if our opponent has double 3, 4, 8, because they're going to actually have space to triple our 3. And that's very easy to avoid by just playing the 5 right now. So we got a little bit lucky, I guess. Our opponent didn't have one of those hands, so let's zoom forward. Okay, that was too far. And we got this situation. We played out our 3, opponent pairs it for 28, and then says go. And we both say go, so our opponent gets an extra point for the last card. So at this point, our opponent's revealed to us 3, 4, 8, and we're thinking that, well, our opponent has all the 3s, all the 4s, but they also have a lot of 5s here as well. I think that I didn't put the clues together enough here. I think that it's more likely they have 5s, mostly because of the order that they've played it out. If you have a 3, 4, 5, 8 hand, then I think it makes sense to want to play out the 4 first, because you don't change the maximum and minimum values of cards in your hand, so you allow yourself to be able to jump in all of the big or small ways that you were able to with your hand at the beginning. Whereas if you play out your 3, then you're also narrowing the range of numbers in your hand, so you give yourself a chance to get stuck a little bit more. So for some reason I thought that my opponent has a 4 or a 3 here. Well, if our opponent has a 3, then the last 2 cards, how we play them out, don't really matter. But clearly our opponent has more 5s than 4s, but I was too fixated on the idea that our opponent has a 4 here. So I played out the 5, and the opponent just shows us that they have the 5, which is definitely more common, and so we end up giving away a few more points than we wanted to. But overall, our opponent's hand, because they have a 5 instead of a 4, so if we imagine what happens if they have a 4, our opponent's hand will be worth 6 points. But here, our opponent's hand's only worth 5 points. So in a sense, by assuming that our opponent has a 4, that's a slightly stronger hand, and by giving them an extra 2 points, we're sort of leveling out the scores of all of these hands a little bit, which there's merit to doing that in general. If you give your opponent's worst hands score some points on the play by taking away score from your opponent's good hands, if you're in a winning position, that means you're going to be winning more consistently against your opponent's entire range, and that just leads to a higher overall equity against your opponent. So I think it's worth a little bit of criticism, but only in its methodology. I think if we dig a little bit deeper, the plays were actually fine. So turns out the plays were fine, but it was definitely worth looking into them. So I hope you got something out of this one, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.